London. June 1851. A woman named Eliza, 26 years old, sits at her parents' breakfast table. She's reading the morning paper. The front page is reporting the results of the new census, the first census in British history to record marital status. There is a number printed in the second column: 500,000 more women than men in England and Wales, 2.5 million unmarried. Eliza puts the paper down. She is one of them. She has known it for some time. But until this morning, no one had written the number down. No one had given it a name. Today, the newspapers have. The word the newspapers have chosen is superfluous. This is the moment Britain decided that 2.5 million of its own women were a problem to be solved. The solutions Britain would propose over the next 50 years were depending on who was writing: the workhouse, the asylum, the colonies, or simply that she would never inherit anything. Eliza has another 40 years to live in this system. She will spend every one of them as a superfluous woman. On the night of March 30th, 1851, every householder in Britain was required to fill out a form recording every person in the house: name, age, relation to head of household, occupation, and for the first time in British history, marital status. The clerks tally the returns. The result arrives in May. 500,000 more women than men in England and Wales. 2.5 million unmarried women out of a national female population of 17 million. By 1861, the gap will grow to 600,000. By 1871, over 700,000. The gap is not a mystery. The census reports themselves explain it. Men were dying in higher numbers, in wars, in industrial accidents, in childhood. And men were leaving, emigrating in their tens of thousands to the British colonies in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The press response is immediate. Newspapers begin to use a word: superfluous. By the end of the year, the equivalent term redundant enters the public conversation. Politicians pick it up. By 1862, 11 years from now, an essayist named William Rathbone Gregg will publish a 40-page proposal that the surplus women be shipped to the colonies. But that is 11 years away. Right now, in June 1851, the question is simply, what do we do with all of them? Britain in 1851 was the richest, most industrialized nation on earth. The same year, in the same city as Eliza's breakfast table, the Crystal Palace opened to display the British Empire's wealth to the world. 2.5 million British women had no place in any of it. And the reason they had no place was that the ideology Eliza had been raised on had only ever written one script for her. Eliza grew up in a household like the one she still sits in, a middle-class home in central London. Father a barrister, mother trained in piano, watercolours and household management. A governess for Eliza until age 15. Lessons in French, etiquette, embroidery and household accounting. She was being prepared. Not educated, prepared. Every Victorian conduct book, and there were hundreds of them, taught the same thing. Sarah Stickney Ellis's The Women of England, published in 1839, was the genre's bestseller. It instructed a woman that her purpose was to be the steady centre of the family circle. Isabella Beeton's Book of Household Management would soon follow. Sermons preached the same. Novels romanticized it. In 1854, 3 years after Eliza's morning newspaper, Coventry Patmore would publish a poem that gave the ideology its most famous name, the angel in the house. The angel is pure, submissive, modest, charitable, useful to her husband, and silent about her own desires. She is the moral centre of the Victorian home. She is also entirely defined by the man at the centre of it. Victorian culture sorted women into exactly two categories: the angel in the house and the fallen woman, the whore. There was no third category. There was no socially approved identity for a respectable, independent, unmarried adult woman with ordinary flaws. This was the script Eliza had been raised on. She had done everything she was supposed to do. She was educated, cultured, accomplished, virtuous, and ready to marry. The only thing she had not done was find a husband. The numbers from this morning's paper told her why. There were not enough. And so, by the morning of June 1851, Eliza was about to discover something no conduct book had told her. By not marrying, she had, without knowing it, kept something married women in Victorian Britain had given away. In 1851, the legal status of women in Britain was governed by a doctrine called coverture. It came from the Commentaries on the Laws of England by William Blackstone, published in 1765. The doctrine was simple and brutal. In Blackstone's own words, "By marriage, the husband and wife are one person in law. That is, the very being or legal existence of the woman is suspended during the marriage, or at least is incorporated and consolidated into that of the husband." What that meant for a wife. She could not own property. Anything she brought to the marriage became her husband's. Anything she earned during the marriage became his. She could not sign a contract. She could not sue or be sued in her own name. She could not refuse her husband sexual access. Marital rape was not criminalized in Britain until 1991. She could not maintain custody of her own children after a separation. The unmarried woman was something different. A spinster in 1851 was, under the law, what was called a feme soul. A single woman. A feme soul could own property, could run a business, could sign contracts, could sue and be sued, could make a will, could inherit and bequeath, could control her own wages. This is the part no Victorian conduct book mentioned. In 1851, Britain, an unmarried woman was more legally autonomous than a married one. Eliza, at her breakfast table, owned more of her own life than her married sister did, and society had decided that for that privilege she would pay socially, economically, and, as the next chapter will show, sometimes with her freedom. Because legal autonomy meant nothing if there was no way to earn a living. The first job Eliza could have taken was governess, a live-in private teacher for a wealthy family's children, the only respectable middle-class career for an educated unmarried woman in Victorian Britain. The pay was £25 to £35 a year. A male tutor doing exactly the same job earned £100 a year, 4 times what she earned, for the same work. The governess slept in a small upstairs room, 8 apart from the family, 8 apart from the servants, belonged to neither. She was educated and behaved like a lady, but she was paid staff. She was, as one Victorian historian put it, a problem. An unmarried, educated woman in a respectable household, earning money, spending hours with respectable gentlemen whom she might, in the Victorian imagination, accidentally attract. The Brontes knew. Anne Bronte published Agnes Grey in 1847, a barely fictionalized account of her own life as a governess. Her sister Charlotte described the work in her letters as more like slavery than I had anticipated. The 1851 census recorded approximately 25,000 women working as governesses in England. By 1849, 2 years before Eliza's newspaper, the Governess's Benevolent Institution was already running a home for destitute aged governesses. A literal old-age home for spinsters who had aged out of the only career open to them. Below the governess, there was the paid companion, a middle-class woman hired by an elderly widow to live with her and read aloud, £20 a year and board. Or the housekeeper, running the household for an unmarried gentleman or a widower. Beyond those 3 jobs, Eliza's class meant almost nothing else was open to her. Factory work was beneath her. Shop work was borderline disreputable. The sweated trades, sewing piecework at 1 penny per shirt, would have killed her. And below the sweated trades, if even that failed, there was a final option Eliza had not yet considered. Stop the video for a moment. If you were Eliza on that June morning in 1851, knowing what you now know, would you accept a proposal from the first man who offered just for the legal safety of a household? Or would you take your feme soul rights and gamble on never finding work? Drop your honest answer in the comments. The Victorian state had its own answer. They were going to send her away. In April 1862, 11 years after the census, an English essayist named William Rathbone Gregg published a 40-page essay in the National Review. The title, "Why Are Women Redundant?" Gregg argued Britain had 440,000 surplus women, and the solution was to ship them to the British colonies, to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, where male settlers outnumbered women and were short of wives. In his own words, there is an enormous and increasing number of single women in the nation, a number quite disproportionate and quite abnormal, indicative of an unwholesome social state. He called them involuntary celibates. 11 decades before the modern internet would resurrect the term. The proposed budget, £8 per woman, shipped £3.5 million in total for the British government to spend its way out of the surplus women problem. 7 months later, Frances Power Cobb, an unmarried Anglo-Irish writer, replied in Fraser's magazine with an essay titled, "What Shall We Do with Our Old Maids?" Her answer: educate them, employ them, give them legal status. She refused to be deported. A real organization, the Female Middle Class Emigration Society, was founded in 1862 and sent 302 women to the colonies over the next 24 years. Gregg's plan had imagined 440,000. The implementation was less than 0.1% of his ambition. But the idea that surplus women were cargo to be moved was now in the British public conversation, and the culture around them was equally hostile. The Old Maid card game entered British homes around 1850. The deck contains pairs, except for one card, the Old Maid. The loser of the game is the player left holding her. The Old Maid card is drawn as a spinster. Hooked nose, a wart, a cat in her lap. Generations of Victorian children grew up internalizing the message: to end up the Old Maid is to lose. Then the cartoons. Punch magazine, founded 1841, ran spinster jokes monthly. The figures were always the same: a thin, pinched woman in black, dressed too young for her age, surrounded by cats, talking to herself in church. Cruel, repeated, printed for a national audience. Of then, the novels. Charles Dickens's Miss Havisham in Great Expectations, 1861. The most famous literary spinster, abandoned at the altar, frozen in time in her wedding dress, raising a ward to break men's hearts. The cultural template was set. A spinster was either pitiful, ridiculous, or vengeful, and the double bind closed. A passive spinster, quiet, withdrawn, dependent on relatives, was pitied and infantilized. An active spinster, writing, teaching, agitating in public, was called unwomanly suspect, or accused of being a woman who had drifted dangerously close to the second Victorian category. The whore, the respectable middle ground, did not exist. There was no acceptable way to be a confident, public, autonomous adult woman in 1851 who was not also somebody's wife. By 1851, Eliza had spent her entire conscious life absorbing this message. From her conduct books, from her family's pity for her unmarried aunts, from her own laughing reading of Punch. The cultural machinery had told her repeatedly that the state she had now reached was the most contemptible a woman could be in. And if the culture mocked her, the medical profession was about to do something worse. Victorian medicine had a theory about women who did not marry. It was called hysteria, from the Greek hystera, womb. The idea, a woman who did not fulfill her reproductive purpose would develop an idle womb, then nervous derangement, then true insanity. Prolonged virginity, the theory held, was a clinical risk factor for madness. In 1867, the founder of modern British psychiatry, Henry Maudsley, published The Physiology and Pathology of the Mind. He argued that prolonged spinsterhood was a clinical pathway to insanity. His name still hangs on one of London's largest psychiatric hospitals. The asylum records bear this out. Colney Hatch Asylum opened outside London in 1851, the exact year Eliza is reading her newspaper. Across the next 3 decades, hundreds of women would be admitted with the recorded cause single life, unmarried, disappointed in love, or old maid melancholia. For married women, the threat was more direct. Under coverture, a husband had the legal power to commit his wife to a private asylum, and many did, as an alternative to scandalous divorce. The phenomenon was so common, historians later named it mad-ass divorce. For an unmarried woman, the threat came from a different direction. Her father, her brothers, the men who still controlled the household she lived in. In October 1895, late in Eliza's lifetime, a 24-year-old woman named Edith Lanchester was kidnapped from her boarding house by her father and brothers and committed to a private asylum because she refused to marry her partner. The lunacy commissioners ordered her released after 4 days. Her case made front pages across Britain. It was not unusual, only public. The angel script protected the wife. The spinster had no script. So the asylum became the script. But for most Victorian spinsters, the threat was not the asylum. It was quieter and lifelong. To understand what spinsterhood really meant, compress 40 years into 4 minutes. Begin at 16. A middle-class girl in 1841 is being trained. Piano lessons 3 times a week. French verbs at breakfast. Watercolor on Tuesdays. Deportment on Fridays. She is not being educated. She is being decorated for sale. Every accomplishment is a line item on a marriage prospectus. At 18, she is presented. The season runs April to August. Hyde Park, promenades, drawing room calls, choreographed evenings where her mother counts the men who ask her name. She's taught these 4 years are everything. By 25, Eliza's age in 1851, the window is closing. Her younger sister is being courted. Her mother begins making comparisons aloud. Old family friends ask politely, "And is there anyone?" By 30, the phrase enters the household, "spinster," said once at dinner, never spoken again. Heard by everyone. Between 30 and 45, her parents age, and she becomes their nurse, unpaid, full-time. The brothers marry and move out. She does not. Caring for aging parents was the recognized duty of the unmarried daughter. It is what spinsters were for. When the parents die, the house passes to the eldest son under primogeniture. The spinster inherits a small annuity, £30 to £50 a year, and a room in her brother's home. She becomes the maiden aunt, useful with the children, invisible at dinner, never the head of anything. For those without a brother to take them in, there were boarding houses for decayed gentlewomen. The Victorian phrase, not mine, where retired governesses and unmarried sisters of failed clergymen lived their last decades on a few shillings a week. Eliza is 25. She's reading the census. She's doing the arithmetic. She knows how this ends. You would not have survived being a Victorian spinster, not because you weren't strong enough, but because the system was airtight. The law denied you the rights it gave to a wife. The economy denied you a wage you could live on. The culture denied you a place at the table. The medical profession denied you your sanity. And your own family denied you a future the moment you turned 25. The reforms came, but not for Eliza. The Married Women's Property Acts passed in 1870 and 1882. Too late for Eliza. The vote came in 1918 for women over 30, 1928 for all, when Eliza, born 1825, would have been 103. Edith Lanchester's case settled it in court in 1895, when Eliza was 70. Every reform that would have saved her arrived for her nieces. She paid the bill for a world she would not live to see. Eliza folds the newspaper. The number 500,000 is still on the page. She is one of them. So is the woman next door. So will be the woman after. That is the part of Victorian England the costume dramas leave out. If you want the rooms, the cameras don't go into. The documented moments of the past most History channels skip. Subscribe to Worlds Before Us. The next reconstruction is already on screen.